Well, I'm just gonna get right into it. I don't have no funny opening joke or a little story to tell. My goal with speaking to you guys, like Jordan said, is I really have no agenda. The board asked if I would share my story because they know some of it and they thought that it would be impactful. It's kind of been my mission for the last 20-something years to share my story with as many people who are willing to listen, because I think there's some lessons in there that are beneficial. So I'm just being obedient to that. So here we have a picture of our lovely family growing up. You'll notice down there on the right-hand side is me in a lovely blue, I'm pretty sure that's velvet shirt with white pants. My mom was quite the fashion person. I have no fashion, but my mom had a lot. So that's me. And then over on the left-hand side is my sister, Valerie, who's 2 years younger than me. And my sister's actually here today, which was surprising, but always good to see her. And, you know, she had a tremendous heart. She still does. She loved animals growing up, as Jordan shared. I love animals too, but maybe sometimes in a different way when I was littler. But you know, my sister, when she wasn't being, when I wasn't torturing her animals, I should say, she received a lot of teasing from me regarding her curly hair, which I'll spare you with the details there. But the thing most people don't know about my sister is she was wicked fast. And when I say fast, a couple things. One, there were several times when we were kids when she would come home with baby rabbits that she chased down. When we were in elementary school, there was a softball field in the back of the school, and every year they would have this race called the turkey trot, where the winner would get a turkey and you'd bring it home to your family. And my sister would beat everybody. She'd beat all the girls, all the boys, and she'd beat me, and I'd be furious. Because she was so fast. She went on to set several high school and college records as a sprinter. And then that little guy in the red and white, I think, sailor sweater in the middle of summer with the red pants was our baby brother Anthony. And he was 3 years younger than me. And he was the family salesman. He was super friendly and outgoing. He had this big, goofy smile, and that could get him out of just about everything. There were many times where I'd be watching TV and he just thought it'd be funny, and I'd hear like the pounding of the footsteps on the floor, and the next thing you know, I'd feel these legs in my back because he jumped through the air and kicked me, and then he would run away. And I would grab him and proceed to try to give him some older brotherly love. And he would run to my mother and cry, and he would not get in trouble for what he did because he would flash the pearly whites and bat the big brown eyes, and it would work, and then I would get a spanking or I'd get grounded. So anyways, we were the three amigos. Got another picture here for you. So you'll notice somebody is missing from the picture, and that is my dad. Up until the age 10, my dad served 3 different prison stints for trafficking in narcotics. And then at the age of 10, he kind of just disappeared. My mom would do her best during those years to make sure we tried to have a relationship with our father. So she'd bring us up to the prisons, and it'd be just like on the movie. I remember sitting there, and you know, you have the plexiglass or whatever it is, and he'd be on the other side, and I'd pick up the phone off the wall and put it to my ear and talk to my dad for maybe a couple of minutes, and he'd ask me how things are going and what's up. And you know, when you're 5, 7, 9 years old, you don't have a whole lot to talk about. So those would be short conversations, and then I'd hand the phone to my sister or my brother, and then us kids would try to sit there quietly while my mom talked to him. So yeah, like I said, at the age after he got out the third time, he kind of disappeared. Mom right there in the middle. Man, we went through a lot, but my mom was a great mom. Being a parent myself, now I understand how hard of a job that is. And my mom would work 2 to 3 jobs to support us, to keep us in sports, to make sure that we had a present underneath the Christmas tree. We grew up extremely poor on the southwest side of Grand Rapids, where we lived until I was 7. We lived right behind a diaper factory. They used to process, make, and recycle these cloth diapers. So back then, they'd send them out. Moms and families would use them, and then they'd come and collect them and bring them back to the factory. And in the summertime, man, it stunk back there. But we had a house, and I didn't know any better, and I was just happy having a roof over my head. But we did not have anything. And I remember my mom would take us kids, and we would walk to the local community building where, she would get 4 sticks of butter, and she would get 2 of these, pints of peanut butter, and she'd get some milk, and they'd give her a couple loaves of bread, and they'd give her this huge block of cheese and these food stamps so that we could go to the store and buy some food. And Mom would find a way to make it work. And then from age 17 to 15, our life kind of changed. And it was almost like the same pattern. So my mom's father, my grandpa, he was a builder, a very successful builder. And what he would do is he would build these houses or rehab them, and he would stick us in it. And we would live there with my mom. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, we would destroy those properties pretty bad. And my grandpa would come there, and I just remember he would get so angry, and he couldn't understand how he was giving us these great places to live, and we'd just destroy him, and it broke his heart. So then he would take us, and he'd move us out to his house, which was over in Granville, but back then it was all country, so he had about 18 acres. And we would live there for 6 months, 9 months, a year, until he was ready to try it again with my mom. But it was the complete opposite of living with my mom, where when I lived with my mom, or we lived with just our mom, I was confined to the yard, right? I had to watch my brother and sister. When we were at my grandpa's house, I could run free. I could climb trees. I could run through the fields. I could pick wild raspberries that grew, in my mom's house. Because she was trying to do everything by herself, it was dysfunction and mac and cheese with maybe some cut up hot dogs almost every meal. But at my grandpa's, it was endless buffet of chips and cheese and chocolate pudding and swimming, right? My grandpa had a swimming pool, so we could go swimming. But as nice as that was, there was rules and there was structures. My grandpa was a military vet, and his favorite saying was, "It's my way or it's the highway." So that meant a couple things. One, discipline, and my grandpa wasn't afraid to pull you by the ear, literally kick you in the butt if you needed it, or take off the belt and give you a spanking. And the second constant was church. My grandpa went to a little tiny Baptist church in Granville, and he'd make sure that we were there every Sunday. And all I remember is, being in Sunday school and hearing these stories about a guy who built a boat with all these animals, and then maybe there was another guy who killed this giant with a slingshot. And after Sunday school, we'd go upstairs where we'd be with the adults, and I'd lean my head back and I'd count the different planks on the ceiling because I was so bored as a kid. But you better not fall asleep, because if you fall asleep, you get a spanking when you get home. Even if Grandpa fell asleep, didn't matter. So, I grew up believing that if you wanted to be a good little boy, you believed in God. That's just what you did. I didn't have any relationship with God. He just felt distant, just like my earthly father. And not growing up with a dad really caused me some deep wounds. I dealt with a lot of abandonment and a lot of rejection It was already hard enough growing up back then in the 80s in a predominantly white area, being a mixed kid. I was bullied constantly getting in fights at school and beat up. I never felt black enough for the black kids or white enough for the white kids. So my identity was that I was never good enough. And I longed to feel chosen. And as a result, like everybody, I self-medicated. I poured myself into sports, football, wrestling, baseball, basketball, track, just so I could feel some applause, some sense of self-worth. And while that was a good thing, I also found myself turning to pornography and sex at a young age. The reality is, I was trying to meet a legitimate need, and I was turning to all these illegitimate ways. I thought I was helping myself, but in reality, I was just lying to myself. I was saying that these things that I was doing didn't matter, when in reality, they did matter. I was saying, you know, the saying is true, and I've learned this, right? I guess that's a part of maturity, is you don't know what you don't know. And nothing is more true than that. Well, at age 15, our dad came back in the picture. Don't know where he was, don't know where he came from, didn't care. My dreams had come true. I had arrived. My dad was in my house. He was living with us. All I could envision was this grand life for myself about he'd be coming to my games. I'd no longer be the only kid there without their dad there. Like, he was going to get to see me do all of these things, and I was going to make him proud, and I was going to make it so he'd never want to leave again. Well, he was there for about 2 weeks, and I remember the specific day that he left. A lot happened on that day, but to give you the short version, I was taking a nap, and I heard this loud smashing noise of like glass breaking, and it was so loud it woke me up. So my room was in the basement. I run up the stairs, run through the kitchen, run through the living room, and we had this huge window that looked out towards the front yard. And I'm looking out the yard, and it's my dad. And he's got his shirt off, and he's just high as a kite. And he's screaming all these obscenities at my mom. Susan, could you do this to me? I loved you, and you're breaking up our family. Quick backstory. He'd been gone, right? So my mom's trying to get on with her life. Come to find out, she'd met somebody at work, and she was pursuing that relationship. And then here comes the father of her children, who just shows up one day and says, I'm back, and I want to be a family. So 15-year-old Mike didn't understand that and thought mom was being selfish. 42-year-old Mike understands that mom was just trying to do what was best, and she needed to have a life of her own. And now this person shows back up, and she's got hard decisions to make. So she had told my dad that she cared about this guy at work and didn't want to have a family with my dad. And apparently that broke his heart again, and he decided to go out and medicate the best way that he knew, and he ended up back in the front yard. So there I am watching him run around the front yard screaming these things, and I'm yelling at him through the window, Dad, what are you doing? And that's when I notice, and I look down, and I see what woke me up. He had taken about a 10-pound rock and picked it up and thrown it through the front window of our front door. So by the time I look down and look back up, and I've just got my arms out like, dude, what are you doing? Here comes my mom around the corner. She's got the phone held up to her ear. She's talking to the police, and she's saying, John Henry, if you don't get out of here, you're going back to prison. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but my dad went from being under the influence of whatever he was to stone cold sober like that. His eyes got so big when he heard those words. And he turned and he ran to the semi-truck that he drove that was parked in the front of our yard, got in, and disappeared down the road. And on that day, I made an inner vow, I made a promise that I was never going to be like my dad. He crushed my heart again. Well, you know, it's funny the way God works is he surrounds you with good people or gives you the opportunity. And I had a good friend named Justin Vanderpool. And he reached out to me and he said, hey, I want to invite you to this thing on Friday night. It's over at this church, and it was over at First Assembly on 44th over in Granville, in this Friday night service. And so I agreed to go with him. I don't even remember what happened during the service. I just remember the end. The pastor got up there. He gave some sort of message. And then he said, you know, if you're here, he asked everybody to close his eyes, and he said, if you're here, you're usually in one of three spots. You either have a relationship with God already, you don't have a relationship with God, or you had a relationship with God and you ran away. And he recited John 1:9 and said, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just and will forgive us of our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. And then he asked us if we would grab the hand of the person next to us. So I grabbed Justin's hand, and I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that I had this hurt inside of me, and all the things that I was trying to do to fix that hurt were not working. And I could feel God tugging on me. And then the pastor asked for everybody to stand up, and he said, if someone grabbed your hand, bring them to the front. So I went up to the front, and like I said, I had grown up in church, and I ended up giving my life back to God. And I tell you that because in that moment, I had this new peace in my life. I had this new hope, and I had a new father. And I can't tell you how much I would need that moving forward. So fast forward 2 years, I'm going to graduate from high school, and my dad shows up. There he is. And he tells me how proud of me he is. He hears I'm going to college, I'll be playing basketball. He says he's going to be coming to my games, he's going to be sending me some money to help me out with school. He's going to be there for my sister and my brother, for all of us. He's sorry he's been away. You know, I wanted to believe him, so I did. Okay. And sadly, after graduation, he disappeared back into the wind again. Fast forward 2 years, I'm sophomore in college. It's October 9th, 2001, and I'm asleep in my dorm, and I get a phone call that wakes me up at the early morning hour of 8:30. And I pick the phone up, and it's one of my best friends, TJ, and I answer the phone, and I'm like, what could you possibly want at 8:30 in the morning? Don't you know I'm sleeping? And he asked me a question. He says, have you called home recently? And I'm like, no, I haven't. And he's like, you need to call home right now. And I'm like, why? What's going on? He's like, I can't tell you. Just call home. I'm like, okay, this is weird. I'll call home. Hang up with him. As soon as I hang up, my friend Justin, that I just told you about, calls me. And he asked me the same question. Tell him no. He says, you need to call home right away. So I call home. No one answers the phone. We lived with my grandparents at the time. So I left a message and then hang the phone back up. And then here comes TJ. He rings again. And he's like, hey, did you speak to anybody at home? I'm like, no, I haven't. I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I can't tell you. I'm like, TJ, listen. You're going to tell me what's going on right now, or the next time I see you, I'm going to beat the living crap out of you. And the phone went silent. And then I hear TJ crying. And he says, I'm sorry, I don't know how to tell you this. Your brother's dead. You need to get home as fast as possible. So I'm just kind of in shock. I hang up my phone, jump down from the bunk bed. My roommate's up by that time because he heard everything that was going on. And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. My brother is supposedly dead. I got to get home as quick as possible. Tell coach I'm not going to be at practice. Throw on my warm-up suit, grab my keys, run across campus to my little two-door Cavalier that I had, jump in it, and drive the 45 minutes home. Pull into my grandpa's driveway. It was a long, winding driveway. And I could see two figures back up by the garage. As I get closer, it's TJ and Justin. I get out of the car, they're crying, they run up to me, they give me a hug, they're telling me they're so sorry. And really, all this is surreal to me because I'm expecting at any moment to wake up from this nightmare or whatever's going on and being back in my dorm room and everything is okay. Go inside, check the message. No messages except mine. No one's there. Go out, and that's when things like the speed like doubles and triples. All of a sudden, all these cars come pouring into the driveway. It's my uncle, and he gets out, and he's crying and saying he's sorry. Then it's my other uncle. Then it's my coach from high school, and then it's teachers. Then it's other friends, and then it's my mom, and then it's my grandma. And then it was the hardest one, which is my sister. She'd been away at college, and her friend went and got her and brought her there. And I just remember that car pulling up and the door opening. And my sister, she didn't get out. She just fell into the fetal position on the ground. And I went over there and I scooped her up in my arms and I took her around the side of my grandparents' house, and my mom joined us. And we sat there. And I was trying to be strong for my family because with all the dysfunction growing up, my natural default mode is Mike shuts down and takes care of everybody else. What Mike is feeling doesn't matter. What Mike wants does not matter. I have to make sure everyone else is okay. Then that switch flips back on and I'm like back to normal, I guess. But that's what happens, and that's what was going on then. So I'm not processing any feelings. I'm just trying to be there for everyone else. And I'm holding my sister, and I look at my mom, and I'm like, Mom, like, I don't even know what's going on. Like, what happened to Anthony? She looks at me with tears in her eyes, and she says, Oh, Michael, your brother took Grandpa's shotgun and drove to the high school and shot himself this morning. And that just blew my mind. I believe that if my brother were ever going to do anything like that, that he would, I'm just going to be candid with you guys, I did not think he had the balls to do something like that. I thought he would take pills or lock himself in a car in the garage. I didn't think he could do that. And that broke me. And I sat there and I cried. And then we had a tough day ahead of us, right? A couple tough days, right? So those days go by, the funeral comes. It's crazy. There's like 2,000 people in the auditorium because my brother knew so many people and our family had such connections in the community. After the funeral, we go to bury my brother at the cemetery, and I'm walking up the dirt driveway to the cemetery, and this door opens, and I hear this voice call my name, Michael, and I turn and I look, and it's my dad. And he's in the back seat of this car, and he asked me if I'd come join him. So I get in the back seat. Part of me is mad. Part of me is whatever. Part of me is exhausted from everything over the last couple of days. And he's just distraught. He's crying. He's apologizing profusely. He's saying that if he was in our lives, something like this would never happen. And then he goes into his same old spiel about how he's going to be there for us. And this is the wake-up call. This is the wake-up call for him. And he's going to be there for me and my sister. So I just listen, right? And after a couple minutes, I tell him, I'm like, Dad, I got to go up here and we got to bury Anthony. And he didn't want to come, and he just stayed there. So I said goodbye. He said he'd get a hold of me. And he disappeared again. Fast forward 2 years, and now I'm graduating from college, and I get this random call on my cell phone. And if you guessed it was my dad, you're right. And he starts talking to me. He's going a mile a minute. I'm so proud of you. First one in our family ever to graduate from college. I'm going to be there, but when you see me, don't be scared. And then he goes on and says a bunch of stuff. And then my brain is like, "What? Hold on. What do you mean? Don't be scared when I see you. What does that mean, Dad?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but I've been diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. I don't look the same as when you remember me." I don't even remember how the phone call ended. Graduation came and went. He didn't show up. He calls me a couple days later. He's over at a friend's house, asks me if I'll come visit him. I drive over there. His friend's got this huge house, takes me through the house, out the back, and he's got like this winding deck around the back. And then it like opens up into like a huge deck. And there's my dad, and he's sitting at this table underneath the umbrella. And he was right. He didn't look anything like I remembered him. So I'm 6'2", maybe 6'3" on a good day, 225. My dad was like 6 foot, probably like 230, 240, big barrel-chested, thick guy. And here he's sitting in that chair, and he's maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. Eyes are sunk in the back of his head, skin's pulled tight around his cheekbones. He don't look anything like I remember him. And in that moment, my heart kind of breaks for him, becomes tender towards him. So I sit down. I don't even remember really what we talked about. We talked for like 10 minutes, and then he's like, I got to go lay down. You know, all the chemo and the stuff that he was doing, trying to save his life, just wore him out. He's like, I need to rest. He's like, will you come back and see me in a couple days? I'm like, sure, just give me a call. Tells me he's proud of me, tells me he loves me. We hug, I leave. And that's the last time I ever saw my dad alive. Fast forward, I jump in the two-door Cavalier with my sister and my mom, and we drive down to Alabama where my dad's funeral is taking place. Go through all that rigmarole, and at the funeral, we're going through the service, and since I'm the eldest son, I'm the first one up. So I walk by his casket, look down, see him in there, say my final words, and I head back to my seat. And as I sit down, something just comes over me. All this anger. I can't explain how angry I was. I'm sitting there and I'm clenching my fist and tears are running down my cheek. And they say when you die, your life is going to pass in front of your eyes. Right then, my life was passing in front of my eyes. All these moments. And he wasn't in any of these moments. And all I could think about was this guy in the box knows nothing about me. He doesn't know what my favorite color is. He doesn't know what I want to be when I grow up. He doesn't know what my favorite food is. He doesn't know anything. And then I hear this small, subtle voice in the back of my ear. And it says, I know everything about you, son. And it was God. And when I heard that, I don't know how to explain it. All that anger just left. My body got all warm, and I just felt peace and comfort and joy. And I was able to let go of that. And in that moment, God unlocked a piece of my heart. Jordan, can you come help me for a second? Will you just hold that right here so I can talk? Thanks. So when we're born, God gives us a whole heart. And then we go through situations in our life. And maybe you're like me and you had a physically distant or emotional father and he wounded your heart. Or maybe you were like me and you had a girlfriend or two who broke your heart. Or maybe you experienced the loss of a loved one. Or maybe you felt embarrassed, shame, guilt, or even some rejection and abandonment at some time in your life. And so you turn to short-term satisfactions like sex, work, drugs, alcohol, so that you could feel chosen. And then you meet that one, the one person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And you get down on your knee and you say, here's my heart. I'm going to give you my whole heart. Here it is. And this is what we give that person. But you know the beautiful thing is that God invites us into an exchange. And he says that we can have a personal relationship with him through his Son, Jesus Christ. And through that invitation, he will take this heart that we're giving our family, our kids, our wife, our friends, and he'll give us our whole heart back. This is what we're meant to live our lives with. This is what our wives deserve. This is what our kids deserve. This is what our friends and those who come in contact with us deserve. It's a higher calling, guys, that we have as husbands, as fathers, as friends. And the only question is, are we going to answer that higher calling? So to close this, a good friend of mine once said to me, he said, you know what? You have every right in the world to be a walking a-hole. And I told him, yeah, you know what? You're right. You're exactly right. I probably do. And I'd be that person if I never accepted the invitation God was giving to me. I wouldn't be the man that I am today. I wouldn't be all these things Jordan said I am. But because I accepted that invitation today, despite going through all that stuff, and it wasn't easy, I have a beautiful family of my own. I've been married for 15 years. I guess I have what people would consider a successful career, but it's only because of God. And the good news is He's extending that same invitation to you if you want it. Thank you.